Well, good evening. It is time for another episode of Motivation and Conversation. And this evening, I have an extraordinary lady that is going to be joining me. Her name is Tanya E. Hood, and she has a plethora of credentials and accolades and all this kind of thing. She is into conflict resolution. She's a coach. She's a project manager. She's an electrical engineer by discipline. I mean, and the list goes on. I tell you, this woman has been such an instrument of encouragement and strength for me over the last several months since we met in a World Summit. Can you believe it? So I want to welcome tonight to Motivation and Conversation, Miss Tanya E. Hood. What's going on, lady?
Hello.
What's
How
happening?
you
What's happening?
doing?
Good. How you be?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good, good, good. Well, listen, it is wonderful to have you on Tuesday Motivation and Conversation. This is where we just chill. Hopefully what we share in conversation will be motivational to the viewers and to those who are listening in or to those who come back and watch this recording. I've kind of talked about the formal things about who Tanya E. Hood is. Talk to me a little bit about who Tanya E. Hood really is. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I try to start off with the basics. You sort of shared it. I'm a wife, a mother, and an entrepreneur, and that covers a whole lot of things, including being an author, being a speaker, being a coach, being a strategist, the electrical engineer by discipline, project manager by trade. And based off of all of that, a woman still learning who she is, a woman still growing in who she's supposed to be, and allowing the God in me to be seen around me and everywhere I go.
Absolutely, absolutely. Phenomenal, phenomenal. Well, it's a standard for us women to wear multiple hats. And so we wear hats with two layers and sometimes three and a scarf on top. But that's what we do, right?
I like that.
That's what we do. That's what we do. And so God has so divinely created us and shaped us and molded us to be able to handle, I say all the time, if men had to do what women do, I don't know where we'd be, you know what I'm saying, and what we would do. So, that is wonderful. And, here again, a lot of those things that you endeavor into are things that are definitely standard kind of things for me in my world. It's for strategy and project management, conflict resolution, and
Right.
things of this nature. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we gel so well. There are a lot of things that we do have in common when it comes to the corporate arena and being an entrepreneur. So you add that along to that, and I tell you, my goodness, we have a pot that's really being stirred. I say we do a thing of it's like entrepreneur gumbo entrepreneur, because even if you have a particular niche or industry area, most of us, we do multiple things, so there's a multiplicity of things that we do in tandem. So you talked a little to us about who you are. Now, one of the things before we go into this next question is that you are a native of the DMV. So talk to us about what it was like growing up in the DMV. I've been a few times, but I've got to make another appearance. It's been some years, but talk to us about that, because I know that has to be very, very, very captivating and interesting to have lived in that area. Because for people who live in the area, sometimes they don't think about it the way people who live outside of the area. So talk to us about being a native of the DMV area.
Well, I have had to learn to appreciate being a native of Washington, D.C., because a lot of people think of it as the nation's capital, but it also, in some elements, is the capital of the world with how we function in some ways. And because of that, I got the opportunity to be introduced to numerous cultures, which has shaped me and grown me into various ways. It's given me an opportunity to appreciate other people. And as I got older, when I finally decided to let Tanya be seen, to allow me to be fully seen like everybody else can be seen. Because where I live, you can walk to the end of the block and see the Capitol. DC is not that big. Growing up, I walked all over the place. So it was not too far to walk down to the monument. I'm glad I got the chance to grow up and visit the Smithsonian and all of the various museums. And there are little pockets around the city that can sort of transport you into another environment. Everybody
Wow.
seems to have a Chinatown. I think our Chinatown is the best. I know I'm partial. Everybody has other elements, but We had a little spot for everybody. It was a little element of Jamaica. If you went up going towards 16th Street and headed towards Calorama Road, if you were on 16th Street, you had like a little Spanish, Hispanic element that you can walk into. And because those individuals were laying their foundation in their culture, you got the chance to experience different foods. And I think I'm an undercover foodie, but I don't really know. I don't really state that. But I do know that growing up, my grandmother is the one that raised me. And she
Yeah,
raised me to understand that you've got to meet people where they are and
absolutely.
appreciate their differences. Even if you don't agree, you can disagree without being
Absolutely.
disagreeable.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that foundation led me to kind of what I share on a regular basis now. And as a project manager, what we do is help people that are in conflict, lay
Right.
out a plan of process to help them through their journey. And I think
Hmm.
all of that was birthed there.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so that was something, that's another piece of another element rather that we have in common because my great grandmother raised me and I called her my grandmother. But that wisdom comes in when you're raised by seniors because there's just so much there. But also I'm hearing that I have a built-in tour guide here, so I haven't even scratched the surface of the things I've seen in DC. So I've got to get it together and give me some dates together because I got the tour guide now. I realize it was so many things in walking distance. And here's the thing: when you're not a native of an area, those are just things you don't realize. Now, of course, I'm from the DFW area, and honey, you need a train or a plane to get around in these parts because it's in walking distance. I'm telling you. So that is good to know, though, because especially when you're in an area that is rich in history and things of that nature, it's good to know that there's so much more there. So we got the practical stuff out of the way. All good stuff to know though, because I got a few more nuggets. So
Okay.
we have to dial down on that a little bit more at a later time. So now I want to know about, of course, you are you have this thing called Red Alert Diaries. Of course, you have a podcast. And so I want to know what is the creative perspective behind Red Alert Diaries? How was it born? What happened here? Talk to us about Red Alert Diaries.
Well, that podcast has a deep grain that started initially with my premiere book, Red Alert. Is He the One? The Pocket Guide to Finding the Love of Your Life. And I never intended to write a book. No one really wants to really share their personal story out in the world and then to have it in print, that seals it
Yeah,
for life.
yeah,
So when I finally got the courage to write my book, people started asking me questions, looking for more insight, wanting to gain some elements about what to do with some of the strategies and actionable steps that I placed in that book. So Red Alert Diaries was born. And it also was there to just give one something that anybody can take
mhm,
away. You can listen to an episode, it's really quick. If I'm doing it by myself, kind of within the 15-minute time range. And if I have guests, then you are going to be one of those amazing guests. We could talk for about 30 minutes. And there you can get the things that you need, one something, because people are looking for insight. And I
yeah.
know, and I'm grateful that the life that I have lived, the chaos, the drama, the breakdown, the splits that sort of ripped my soul apart, and the way that I had to walk back forth to put it together is
Yeah.
birthed and discussed in that podcast.
You mentioned something about your story and not intending to, write a book about your story. But what I'm finding in this day and time is so often, we are conditioned by tradition not to talk about our stories, to keep those things kind of private and hidden. But I'm learning, and I have learned that people are more transformed by the reality of the authenticity of your story and the things that you have worked through, made it through, lived through, because it helps them to manage what they're going through. And
Mhm.
so, talk to us a little bit about the impact that your story has had on people. What are some of the testimonies? What are some of the experiences that people have had as a result of you, doing this unintentional book, authoring this unintentional book, talking about your story? Because, like I said, I think this is what people look for in this day and time. They want what's real, especially the millennials, and the Gen Zs. They're looking for that authenticity.
So speaking of generations, I'm from Generation X. And from that generation, I was raised in an environment where you don't throw your stuff out in the street. What
Right.
goes on in a house stays in the house. But to tell my story, I had to open up and remove some of those things. We have an element embedded in how we are raised, and we don't pay enough attention to how our environment shapes us and makes us. I had to move past what I was raised to believe, how I was raised to function, because being Black and woman in America, there are a whole lot of stigmas and things that I've had to function under, move through, and process. True. So that's one of the main reasons why I didn't want to share my story, but my heart is there to serve. My heart is there to give. And I saw my goddaughters about to walk over the landmines I had already crossed. What I did not want to do is allow another generation to sit and soak in the mess that I had walked through. And had anybody shared some insight beforehand, like you were saying, I may have made some different choices. It was my grandmother and my godfather that encouraged me to be an engineer. I did not want to do that, but that's what I was told to do. So I did. I'm a graduate of Howard University. I'm thankful, but I didn't want to do that. That is what I was told to do. When we are constantly living a life, if you're the type of person that's supportive and giving, you often live the life that you are told. So you lose your voice. And I found myself after my divorce with no voice, because I was raised in an environment that told me to shortcut it, and then to find myself on the back end of that divorce, trying to figure out who was Tanya. That is why the book was written. And because I had to find my voice to be authentic to myself, the flaws that I had and the joys and lows that I needed to get through to become the best version of myself. That is how the book was birthed. That is how I operated in sharing the insight, and those strategies and actionable steps is what exists inside of Red Alert. And the podcast is just an extension.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it gives you an opportunity to further impart and impact lives, because as people share, it gives you the opportunity to share things that may be in a corner of your mind or your subconsciousness that you did not write. However, it's pulled out of that interaction of the experience that someone else is going through, or what they're experiencing as they are, in fact, experiencing your writings. And I tell you, it's one of those things, talking about your story, oftentimes, for a lot of people, it opens wounds. But I say you're opening it, but you're opening to heal it. Because oftentimes we don't, we just don't even bother. We just allow it to, it'll heal one day, and so it's just left to do what it does. But oftentimes you need to open it to heal it. And a lot of times, when you have an injury or you have a cut or whatever, oftentimes they're going to go into the wound, clean it out, and then they're going to prepare it for healing. And so oftentimes that's what we have to do. We have to go into those places that we don't feel that are, comfortable, that we don't feel we want to talk about, that we feel there's shame, that we feel there's resistance. And we have to confront some things, clean some things out, and then we can start to repair the wounds. And so,
I want to add on to that, because I had my breakthrough with that concept when I broke down in the middle of Safeway, because emotions buried alive will resurrect themselves at the most inopportune time.
And so writing the
book, I had a level of healing when I wrote the book, because after that breakdown, I didn't want that to happen again. So I had to go and dig out, like you were saying, clean the wound. And I had a clean space, because I don't believe you should teach lessons from a place that you're not healed. But I also want to preface that there may be different levels of healing that you have to walk through.
Absolutely.
So the book opened up other layers of healing that I'm now sharing in a course.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that is so key, because you have to be able to broaden the perspective, right? And to your point, it's levels, and it happens over time. I recall in one of my writings that I was talking about these emotions that I didn't even realize I was going through, abandonment and feeling rejected and, feeling like damaged goods. When you go through these things, I too went through a divorce. And so when you go through a lot of these things, and a lot of things were carried over from childhood, a lot of things were carried over from my young adult life, even, when I was like 8, 9 years old. So these were things, and the thing about it is that things that are events, it's these episodic memories. So these are major things that happen. There are always episodes in your mind because you always remember what happened. And it's like you can remember it as if it was yesterday, right? It's vivid, it's clear. And you can describe the room, you can describe the people, you can describe the surroundings, everything. And so, I began to deal with that. And it's one of the things that oftentimes keeps us from allowing our gifts to be born, and so that's why I was saying, what is the perspective that allowed Red Alert Diaries to be born? Because oftentimes it's those kinds of things that prevent us from giving birth to those gifts and those talents and our purpose and helping us to move forward in life. So that is excellent. And I'm glad that, these layers are developing and you're able to scale this piece and grow it even more and help people on a different level. Because you're going to have some people going to start maybe where you were or where you were not, but then they're going to end up being where you are now. And so that's an awesome, awesome thing. And I think for us as women, we have to continue to find ways to be creative in ways to help people to be able to get to those places of conversing and sharing and opening those wounds, helping them to clean the wounds so that the wounds can then begin to heal. That's an awesome, awesome, awesome thing. So that just leads me into my next question about this experience of becoming an author. What was that like? So you say you didn't plan for it. So, okay, what happened?
So as I stated a little bit earlier, my goddaughters were going away to college. And as they were doing what college students do, experiencing new things, getting new relationships, I knew that I had to start sharing more. And so after my divorce, the electrical engineer in me was a good choice for my grandmother and my godfather because the nerd in me thinks in outline. I'm the type of individual that needs process and structure and order. I'm that friend that you would call if we were headed on a trip. I would map out the distance from your house to the airport. I would plan the different activities where we're headed. And so that is how I naturally think and how I naturally function. And as a result of growing up in the environment that I grew up, I have the natural ability to organize chaos. So I created a 4-page outline after my divorce, walking through every element so I can heal. Also, giving myself a game plan. Because when I started applying that game plan, then I recognized it will work. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, because that book is birthed from 3 elements: how to have a better relationship with yourself, so you can have a better relationship with others, and then the glue. The glue that seals it all together is having a better relationship with a being greater than yourself.
Absolutely.
And they didn't have that.
Yeah.
And they got the opportunity to see that the outline was real, because by the time that showed up, I was in my new marriage.
Yeah.
So they saw the breakdown a little bit from the conversations. They weren't around to see the chaos and the divorce, because it was like 7 years in between the journey.
Yeah.
But they were a part of my new life, my new marriage with my new husband. And they saw that dynamic strong and faithful. And were like, I want a relationship like yours. I'm like, we both had to grow into this. And this is how I did it. So I gave them the outline. When people don't have a logical, analytical mind, an outline does not work.
No. Not for the practical people. That doesn't get it. It's too much work for them. It's like too much thinking. Yeah, it's like too much thinking. It's too much. It's too much thinking.
So she would sit in her dorm and she would call me. She's like, Mom, I'm reading this, but I don't understand. What's the story behind it? So I would tell her the story. She would record me or type it out. I don't know how she did it, but she would send me an email with my story. And I'm like, that's not exactly how that story goes. So I had to write the story so it wouldn't get messed up. That is the thing that we forget. When you don't want to share your pain, when you don't want to give access to your process of healing and being whole, when somebody else gets a hold of your story, it will not be the same, and it will not have the impact that you truly intended. So I had to write my story. And as a result, the book was birthed. And then when I gave her the book, she then shared that with everybody else around her. And then I got calls and the discussion points. And from there, Red Alert Diaries, the podcast, the Facebook.
Wonderful.
Bunch of other stuff showed up.
And it's amazing. That's amazing. it's awesome how the things that we feel are our deepest pain and hurt can be on the surface uh, an opportunity for deliverance for somebody else or an eye opener for somebody else. And the first question is, man, I need to talk to her. How did she do it? How did she get through it? What, you know what I mean? What did she do? What was her process? Although they may not want 4 pages of an outline, they
I didn't
want
do that.
they want you to give them some details on how you made it through this process. But it was kind of the same thing. I wrote about my divorce. And I didn't write about the, and most times people think they finna get the dirt, right? So when you say, they thought they was finna get the dirt. But I wrote about my lessons learned.
Me too.
And I think, that perspective, when we talk about what we learned from what we went through, people began to focus more on the healing side than the going through side, although it didn't feel good, when you went through what you went through. But at the end of the day, to know that you could help somebody as a result of going through that process and establishing a process for yourself to come out of it and to heal that's, to me, that's the glory, that's the icing on the cake. And so God's used that situation, and you were strong enough to allow him to use you in that situation to be strength to someone else, to find, and I know for me, when I was writing some aspects of mine, I mean, it was tears rolling. And so some of those
Mhm.
pages got smeared, the ink got smeared. And so, I had to just go back and figure out what was I trying to say. But at the end of the day, because the healing was happening, wow, because when you're confronting those things, it's a real I don't know, emotional, like it's like an
Mhm.
emotional tsunami that's happening. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like you're attacking it, you're really dealing with it. So to have her be this point of intervening to get it out of you, you know what I'm saying? To get you to like, no, let me tell it right. No, that ain't what happened. That's not how they
Right.
went.
Right.
So you had to go back into it to pull that piece out, to pull those pieces out to make sure, no, this is really what occurred. So that is awesome, awesome, awesome. And I, so have you, with that being said, have you found it to have a particular demographic of young ladies that it's, kind of impacted, or has it been both co-ed? Talk to us
So
about that.
there's been morphing over time. So that book my premiere book was initially published in 2017. So
Mm-hmm,
pre-COVID, the
mm-hmm,
audience was 60% women, 40% men, because my current
mm-hmm.
husband is also my editor.
Okay.
The way that I'm wired with my natural, logical, analytical mind and growing up a tomboy, I can speak to both male and female sexes when you're speaking
Yeah,
strategy and actionable
yeah,
steps. That's how
yeah,
I'm naturally wired. So the
yeah.
book was geared towards women because we know women pretty much buy, but I
Sure.
let God lead how it was displayed. But my
Yeah.
personality of sort of gender neutral is in there. So when you look at the
Mm-hmm.
cover of the book, it's just what I was going through. Red alert. So there's a siren,
Yeah.
no pictures of anything. It's a construction zone, signals around the side. So the cover
Mm-hmm.
is how I speak.
Yeah.
General. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if you're male or female because relationship breakdown, break up, tore up, flow up, whatever we're dealing with
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
happens for both of us, male and female.
Absolutely.
Then when I started going on sharing the book and book signings and tours and teaching the strategies and the lessons, it was more divorcees because I started just sharing, this is my reset story from divorce.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was the audience initially. And then it
Yeah.
became 70% women, 30% men, because
Yeah.
men don't want to talk about it, but they still
Yeah.
exist. Because what I
Yeah.
discovered when I
Absolutely.
had a Facebook page that I joined, it wasn't my page, I did not start it. But when I
Mm-hmm.
joined it, that dynamic grew from about
Mm-hmm.
900 and I think 38 or 68 people. I can't remember the exact number initially. When
Mm-hmm.
COVID hit is when I had to pivot and I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
how to do that pivot. But
Mm-hmm.
God said, you're
Mm-hmm.
still speaking to divorcees and all
Yeah.
of it is about relationships because we
Yes.
forget
Yes.
we have relationships in everything, relationships with people, places,
Absolutely.
and things, and how that looks
Absolutely.
and how that forms is different.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
COVID hit and I joined the Facebook group, then my audience pivoted. It was a divorce group. It's called Life
Wow.
After Divorce.
Divorce. Yeah.
But now my audience is 80% married,
Yeah.
20% divorce.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
dynamic of relationship between men and women is still sort of pivoted 70%,
Yeah.
75% women, and then the 25%, the 35% men. So in that dynamic, I have both I'm still speaking to, but I just speak to the element. You see,
Yeah.
we forget that we are
Yeah.
all here on the same human experience.
Yeah.
When you speak
Yeah.
about the generic element of who we are, that's global. It's not male or female.
Yeah.
You hurt like I hurt. You bleed like
Absolutely.
I bleed. And if we
Absolutely.
ever, especially in the United States, get true clarity of how much we are alike, then we are not. We can move into a faster pace of healing and being whole.
Absolutely. 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 And every divorce is not a drive-by. It's not a, give me a Big Mac Happy Meal, and if it ain't my order ain't right, then I'm out. Most people want to try to make it work and they have made an effort. And there's a reason why there is the hurt. There's a reason why there is the pain. Either that woman or that man, whichever one, has tried. And to no avail, it didn't work. Whatever happened. But most people don't get married to get divorced. And I talked about that so much. I would have been the last person. My parents were married 50 years, rest their souls. They were married 50 years. They were married for as long as I was old when my mother transitioned. She passed the year of my 50th birthday. And what I knew, they had ups and downs, ins and outs. But what I knew was that you try to work it out. You try to talk it out. You try to find a resolution. But what you have to realize is that that other person may not have seen what you saw. And so you have to figure out your own way of doing things. And so, it's not something that people go into. So having a demographic of that many married people is because they're trying to figure out, how do I continue to make it work? What are the things that maybe I need to work on? Because I feel like people are trying to find answers, right? And sometimes those answers are not necessarily from those who are clinically inclined to help you, but those who are experientially inclined to help you. Because if somebody's experienced something that is similar to what you're going through or experiencing, they may be more inclined to give you more realistic approach of how you possibly could make your way through it. So I think that's an amazing thing. And I think it is definitely a focus of ministry at that point, because that means that, there's something in particular that God has given you about your situation that is impacting this demographic. That is amazing. 80% married people.
Yeah, and
Listen.
here's the thing, what you're talking about, that ministry part, because
Yeah.
Red Alert Diaries, the podcast, was birthed after I joined that Facebook group. And in a
Mm-hmm.
2-year time period, it grew from less than 1,000 to over 23,000 people. And they
Wow.
needed the strategies. And I know that I have like I stated earlier, the natural ability to create order out of chaos. But I also
Yes.
have a firm belief in the seat of my soul that the only reason we exist on this planet is to help
Mm-hmm.
one another. And as I
Yeah.
saw where they needed support, I gave what I could there, but I knew there had to be something a little more lasting for people to go back to. And so Red
Yeah.
Alert Diaries, the podcast, was birthed. Now, it was birthed of me kicking and screaming because I figured, Lord, I'm in there. I'm helping, I'm praying, I'm giving
I
some
know.
insight, and there is a strategy with everything that I share. I'm just designed for strategy. I do that both personally and professionally, so you're gonna get it. But God
Yeah.
was like, I need you to have more of a platform for
Yeah.
when they're ready, because not everybody can see when they're in pain. And I recognize that that is something that I had to struggle through, because right after my divorce, I had my little goggles on of hurt, my little goggles on of pain, and my goggles on of shame. When you're in the
Yeah.
sitting in the midst of
Yeah.
those modes with that covering your soul, you
Yeah.
can't hear the strategy when it's ready. And that's one of the main reasons why I give away chapter 1 of my book. Because if you never want to buy the book, you don't have to.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you do have a 90-day strategy that will get you healed, get you whole, and move through. And if a new
Absolutely.
marriage is what you're trying to get, I got that because I did it
Yeah.
and it worked.
Yeah.
But you can have chapter
That's what
1.
I'm talking about. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can have chapter 1 and still get something that you can
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
away right here, right now, today.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I tell you, we are at our time. It has been an amazing
Well, thank you
conversation.
for having me.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have a part two. It has been awesome talking with Tanya E. Hood today. Make sure you get the E in there because there's some more Tanyas out there, right?
Yes, yes.
So we want to make sure, listen, tell us, Tanya, how we can get in touch with you, how we can follow, where we can listen to the podcast. What just give us what we need to do.
Simplicity is how I function. You can simply go to tanyaehood.com. There you can see the podcast, where it's located, all the social media links that you want to locate me on are at the bottom. If you want me to work with you and join you on the journey, you can click under the Work With Me tab. And if you just want to have a quick conversation, go to the Contact Me section of my webpage and let's schedule some time to talk.
Absolutely. All right. There you have it. This is Tanya E. Hood. So you definitely want to go follow her on all of her social media platforms and connect with her. And I'm telling you, you will be blessed by what she is doing in the earth in this season and in this time. So once again, thank you so much for being a part of this week's Tuesday Motivation and Conversation. Listen, for those of you that are viewing now, I'm telling you, I know you've been helped. For those of you that don't watch the replay, get ready. Just make sure you come with your pen and your paper because you're gonna need to take some notes. All right. All right. Well, until next time, we'll see you back here for motivation and conversation. Bye-bye.